Hey, hello everybody. Reagan and Laura, you're here bright and early at the top of the hour. And Laura, if I'm not mistaken, you're on vacation right now and you're still here. You're just so committed. I love it. It's so inspiring. Are you somewhere warm? It looks like you have a bathing suit on.
Yeah, I'm in the Dominican Republic.
What? Is that your first time?
Yeah, it's my first time in the Dominican. Yep.
I've heard it's beautiful. Are you enjoying it?
It is. Yeah, it's really pretty. Yeah, we're liking it so far. So I'm actually teaching yoga. So
You're teaching yoga?
yeah.
Amazing. Like at a resort? Tell me.
Yeah. So there's a company that you can contract through as a yoga instructor or a fitness instructor or whatever. And you can sign up to teach at resorts and pay like 80% of the cost, like 80% off the full cost of staying at one of these places. Yeah.
And you can take someone with you.
And you can take someone with you. So my
So
husband's on the beach.
you have a +1 almost for nothing costs in a beautiful place doing something you love on a holiday. I mean,
It's kind of a good deal. It's kind of a good deal. So this is my third trip. So I've done 3. This is my third.
really, what other locations did you do?
I did Riviera Maya in Mexico in 2019, and then I did Jamaica just this past May because I was supposed to go last year, but obviously didn't do that. So I went to Jamaica in May, and then I'm here now, and then next spring we're going to Costa Rica.
Oh, beautiful. I did Costa Rica, not teaching, not on the excursion you're doing, but I have been there and it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
These
you
are
kind of
great
like
spots.
Yeah, and you kind of do like resort yoga, right? So it's kind of like you don't know who you're going to get, so you kind of have to just read the room and be like, okay, what's accessible for people, what's going to make the most sense. This is the first time I've ever taught on the sand, so that's been kind of tricky because you feel your wrists and your joints pretty quickly. So to make sure like you're not holding people in down dog forever, you're not holding people in balancing poses for a long time. So it's just being very aware, very body aware and things like that. But it's only a half-hour class too, so that helps.
Wow. What a skill builder. 30 minutes in unknown terrain with a room of people you don't know.
Yeah. You got to like be able to think on the fly, right?
Exactly. On your toes. I don't know if you can see the chat where you are, Laura. Reagan sent you a love note and said it sounds like a fabulous deal and she wants you to enjoy. So
yes. Thank you, Reagan.
Agreed. Yeah, it sounds amazing. When I was in Costa Rica, I did that 30-minute yoga class on the beach.
Yeah.
And what I remember the most is that the instructor wanted to try, like I could feel him wanting to try. And I kept thinking I could just stare at the water and I'd be fine.
It's too bad. I'm good.
Yeah. So I'm sure that whatever you offer them is going to be amazing and you don't have to try hard because they're on vacation and they're enjoying it.
Yeah, I'm just kind of like super slow, very methodical, just kind of like, I have to talk a lot louder because we're on the beach. So there's just a lot of ambient noise. So, just taking in all those factors and making sure people aren't like, what's going on? I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But that's like a good 3rd and 5th chakra exercise to like speak your power from a clear place, but not overbearingly on people. Yeah. Laura, I'm so excited for you. And you came here and shared it with us. What a treat. Thank you for that.
Yeah. It's a great opportunity for people to do. So it's an awesome way to get a vacation in and not pay full price.
Hey, right. Yeah. Maybe I'll do that someday. Who knows? As long as they have internet, which they clearly do, you can teach from anywhere, right?
Yeah.
I'm not much. Yeah. Anyway, it's not about me. Okay. It is about you though. You lovely practitioners who are here with me today. Let's see. A bunch of people jumped in that I didn't say hello to. Anita and Naima. Hi. And I see you on my calendar for tomorrow too. I'm super excited. Reagan, we've been talking to you in the chat. Sarath Babu, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. If not, I would love for you to correct me because I would love to pronounce it just as you want to hear it. That's amazing. Beautiful. So I didn't expect a huge crowd today because it's a holiday week here in the US. But I'm super glad that you're all here. I am. And I know, Laura, you're here specifically. I thought if I change the topic, Laura's going to have my head. So I'm not going to change the topic. Not that I would anyway, but as I was reading the email that went out this morning, I thought, yeah, we definitely are having that talk today. Heather just dropped in too. Heather, I'm glad you're here. At any time, guys, if you want to come off camera or off mute and interact, you're welcome to. You are being recorded, just so you know. I'm sure you saw that as you came in. For those of you who've not been here before, we work this hour of training pretty consistently. Like, I talk for 20 to 30 minutes and train you on something fun and probably why you're here, because you saw it in the email. And then for the last 30 minutes, we do practitioner hot seats and Q&A. So you can bring a client question, you can bring any anatomy question. There's basically no question that's off topic. And I'm here to serve you in that way. And I love the Q&A part because, like you were saying, Laura, it like keeps me on my toes. Like, oh, do I have an answer for that? So I love that part. And you get to have what you need from this training as well. So whatever you're here for, whatever you're working on in your world, bring it to the hot seat, and we'll talk it out. I'm Gina Schatz. I developed the Schatz method, which is a form of movement and manual therapy that I work with clinically. I developed it in my clinical practice because I was looking for pain solutions and functional adaptations for people who were moving in ways that I didn't think was optimal for them. So I've been working with that method for a few decades, and I train practitioners. When you hear me say mastery practitioner or practitioner mastery program, that's what I'm referring to. That method is what I share there. In this training, what I share on Tuesdays is a sliver of anatomy and or functional mechanics. Every once in a while, we get into physiology. And the idea here is to give you one nugget and really like take it somewhere and do something with it. Hopefully, if I've done what I really intend to do, I've changed your mind about something, or at least made you think about it differently. That's what I love to do. And sometimes that's frustrating for folks. Naima, you're on camera. Hi, it's nice to see you. Sometimes that's frustrating for folks. And if that style of training doesn't work for you, I'm not your girl. I'll just be honest with you, because strategic thinking is, for me, one of the biggest skill sets that we need as practitioners if we're navigating pain, injuries, or restrictions, because we need to know how the body's designed, right? That's our anatomy base. And then we need to know what went wrong, which is a guess. And then we need to piece together how to get someone back to how they were functionally designed to move or function. And so that's strategic thinking. So that's why I tend to answer questions with questions. I always do end up giving the answer, but I answer questions with questions. And I really like you to think through things in new ways. And that basis of anatomy is really key, right? We've talked about that for the last several weeks as I've been walking you through the anatomy principles. I put these principles together in order in the way that I think really matter. And that means if we know step one, then we can build on step two, then we can take steps 1 and 2 into step 3, think strategically about them, and then carry on from there all the way up through, there's 8 anatomy principles that I outlined. If we instead jump to the end, someone came in pain, this is their symptom, so I need to do X, Y, and Z. Without that foundation, we don't have clarity on where we're taking them back to. And that foundation is so simple. And I'm not meaning that to say that the body is simple. It's not. It's like the most complex thing on the planet. But the function of the body and the way it's designed is consistent throughout bodies. And that makes it really simple. We all have the same shoulder joint. We all have the same range of function in a particular area of the body. If we can get those things down where we're not in question anymore about it, it makes our strategic thinking and our problem solving much easier, because we know exactly where we're taking them back to, and we're going there with confidence instead of confusion, or sometimes we get a little, we spook ourselves a little bit. So all that to say, these nuggets each week are designed to drop nuggets in the bucket and make you think differently about it. And then maybe you'll take it out into the world and you'll see things differently. That's my objective. So today I promised Laura for 2 weeks now that we're gonna dive into intrinsic and phasic muscles. What the heck? Okay, if you've not heard of those two before, don't panic. It's totally okay. There's a lot to talk about in intrinsic and phasic muscles, specifically on the intrinsic part, because phasic muscles we tend to talk about more commonly. The intrinsic portion of muscles we can cover with as much excitement as we cover the other muscles. And if you're not even sure what those two are yet, I'm not even bringing you into the conversation yet. Hang with me. But I want you to know that this intrinsic part that I'm going to introduce today is so vast and so important that it's literally the third touchstone of my method, that method that I developed, that I work with clinically. So there's a whole lot of material that I have that I want you to have on intrinsic muscles. And today in 20 minutes, I'm going to give you like that much, but I'm going to give you a good nut. I'm going to give you a good piece, a good nugget. Okay. All right. So we first start talking about phasic and intrinsic muscles in Inspired Beyond Anatomy Level 1. And the reason why I started on Level 1 is because it's literally that obvious that there are two different groups of muscles. There's a group of muscles that are known as phasic muscles. Those do gross motor movement. Those are big muscles that you know the name of: quadriceps, hamstrings, biceps, triceps. They do, when I say gross motor movement, they are the ones that are involved in picking up a grocery bag. They are the ones that are involved in getting you up a flight of stairs. Okay. So they do gross motor movement. You probably know the names of them. They're large muscles. They're superficial, meaning not that superficial, like they don't have depth to them, but they're superficial underneath the layer of the skin. Personal trainers refer to them as mirror muscles because you see them in the mirror changing shape when you exercise and contract them, when the muscle spindles lay on top of each other. And we've been talking about that for weeks now. We've been talking about muscles since anatomy principle number 1, because that's how important it is. So phasic muscles are a big deal. They're a super big deal. They are involved in contraction. They are what needs to happen in order to create what we think of as stretch. There's no stretching. If you haven't seen that class yet, please go back and watch that. They are involved in reciprocal inhibition and the lever system. When one contracts, the other one lengthens. All of that is phasic muscle action. Okay, so we've been talking about phasic muscle action without calling it phasic muscle action for weeks and weeks and weeks. Okay, great. There's another equally important category, classification of muscles called intrinsic. Think inside when you think intrinsic. Intrinsic muscles are not superficial. They are close to the bone. You won't be able to palpate them. If you're a manual practitioner like I am, you can't touch these muscles. They're too deep. They're not like the others are. Again, it's not like a personality evaluation, but they're layers deep. Sometimes we miss this when we're studying muscles. When we think of a muscle, it's great to take it out of context and study that muscle, look at the striations, know where the attachments are, and then the action that it does. But sometimes we forget that they're literally stacked on top of each other, doing those actions that we've identified. And each muscle stacking can do different arrangements of movement and function. That's really important to know. Underneath all of those layers of phasic muscles is intrinsic muscles. And again, they are very close to the bone. Those muscles you don't see changing in the mirror. In fact, it's often not impossible, because I can see it. It's very challenging to see those muscles in motion because they do not do phasic action. They don't pick up groceries. They don't take you up a flight of stairs. The job of those muscles is twofold: posture and balance. Posture and balance. So if you have optimal posture, you are engaging intrinsic muscles. But if you don't know what optimal posture is, you can't engage intrinsic muscles. Okay. So that gets a little dicey. So then it's like chicken and egg. Do I need to know the muscles first, or do I need to know optimal posture first? So you need to know both, right? So we need to know alignment, functional alignment, like how the body's designed. Back to that conversation I just said a minute ago, like how is the body designed? Is phasic the same as extrinsic? Yes, it is, Nima. Yes, very good. We need to know how the body's designed. We need to know what optimal function is, which doesn't necessarily reveal itself just in the design, right? And massage therapists, we're notorious for this. We know all the pieces parts, but we don't actually know how they function because all the work that we do is passive. Like, the client's laying on the table, so we don't get to the function part. And other folks like yoga teachers who do posture don't necessarily have the anatomy to back up what they're doing with posture, so that the optimization of the posture gets missed. And I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I'm both a massage therapist and a yoga teacher. That's how I know what's missing, because I went through all that training. I get it. There's pieces, parts that we could all click together and learn more from. That's what I'm here to do. In posture, in optimal posture, there are some functional touchstones that get to be known, like really well known, for you to know for sure whether you're engaging intrinsic muscles to their full potential. And that's really the way to do it, because again, you can't see them moving. The other key in intrinsic muscles, balance. I already said posture, balance. Whether we have balance or whether we don't have balance is a guide, a pointer towards intrinsic muscles. And it's a little more strategic in our way of thinking around it. So sometimes folks will say, well, I have terrible balance. And that can mean that they find themselves wobbling in a yoga pose, right? Or having a difficult time making their way up a flight of stairs. For me, what I'd love for you guys to see is that that is an invitation to strengthen intrinsically. And that's another chicken and an egg. Like, do I strengthen intrinsically and then I get balance? Or do I work on the balance and then strengthen intrinsically? It all comes down to function. So let's use tree pose as an example. For those of you who are yogis, tree pose, you get it. If you're not a yogi, it's a balance pose. It's one-legged balancing, which that's plenty to know for this next piece that I'm going to share with you. If I'm in one-legged balanced pose, any one-legged balanced pose, if you know tree pose, picture tree pose in your head. You can stand on one leg and not have balance, be doing the standing. You can be bracing into phasic action and distorting the alignment of the body and still be balancing on one leg. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're balancing by way of the use of intrinsic muscles. And that's the key difference. So then how do you do that? Well, you got to know the alignment first. You're like, got to know where the function design dictates how the body should be in alignment. That's not what we're talking about today, but we'll talk about it. I talk about it in full length in applied functional anatomy. So we go over phasic and intrinsic muscles and inspired beyond anatomy level 1, and then we put it together with posture and functional alignment in applied functional anatomy. That's what that's all about. So today we're talking about the differences between phasic and intrinsic and like the key pointers to both. So if I'm going through a balance pose, for example, the best thing to do for a movement practitioner, like tree pose and yoga teachers, is to know what that optimal alignment is, guide your students into that optimal alignment, and then check to be sure that the intrinsic muscle designed to do that job is actually engaging. One of the key, okay, I'm going to pause. I tend to talk too fast and roll my sentences into run-on sentences. I don't want to do that. I want to give you a moment to be like, okay, what did she just say? Okay, so I'll repeat it. Get your peeps into optimal alignment. If you don't know what that is yet, it's coming. Then be sure that they're engaging intrinsically. Because again, you can be in a balanced position and using phasic muscles and distorted alignment and still be, quote, balancing. So just because you're balancing doesn't mean you're engaging intrinsically. So what I said so far, posture and balance are the role of intrinsic muscles. In order to know whether you're engaging intrinsically, you've got to know what optimal posture is, and you've got to know what optimal function is to get them in alignment to then balance. Okay, so it's like step 1, step 2, and then they all kind of merge together. Okay, cool. And now I stopped myself in my run-on sentence and I forgot what I was going to say. It was something spectacular, I'm sure. Okay, it'll come back to me. You guys are smiling, so that's good. Keeping it real here. That's what happens when we do live. I have no notes, by the way. Oh, I should maybe say this. Every week when I come on with you guys, I have an idea in mind that I'm going to talk about, and I don't have notes around me. If I turn my camera around, all you'd see is I'm sitting at my kitchen counter, you'd see my stack of tomatoes that I'm getting ready to make something fabulous, and my Brussels sprouts. Like, I don't have notes here. And the reason that I want you to know that is because I would love for you to know anatomy like this, where you can just riff and like know it, because your clients are going to drink that in. Even if they're not anatomy gurus at heart, them knowing that you know it in a way that you can explain it to them super clearly so that they start to understand their body is magic. When you can get your clients in a relationship with their body where they feel like they're in partnership with their body instead of afraid of what the hell is about to happen or why they got in pain or how to prevent it going forward, you have given them such a gift, such a gift. I just got a love letter from a client today. So this is on my mind about that topic. So this is on my mind. Who's sending me love letters? Heather, you would love that too. Awesome, awesome. I talk about that. I'm jumping around here a little bit. I talk about that in the 4-part success framework. I really believe that yes, we need to be body experts for sure. That's one part of the framework. And we need to be able to market what we do so that we can get clients in the door for sure. Messaging to them what we do and why we do it and what's in it for them, totally different than the first two that I already mentioned. And then you got to be professional about it, right? So like I've gone through lots of learning in my days. Sometimes I was too impassioned and like, why aren't you doing your exercises? And that doesn't win over favors very well. And then I've been really passive about it just to see if going to the other end of the spectrum. Anyway, the point is we want to be professional because a lot of us have been here for a while, right? And we know the ropes. And so this is a profession and we get to raise the caliber of everyone around us, our clients and our peers for sure. So messaging and having real clarity is a piece of the puzzle. It's a piece of the pie. And again, we talk about that fully in the mastery program. Let's get back to intrinsic and phasic muscles. So these two muscle groups, does this make sense to you guys, by the way? These two muscle groups, are you hearing it differently? I am surprised how many practitioners still yet are to discover intrinsic muscles. I'm super surprised by it actually, because it's not like we don't learn muscles. It's not like we don't know them by name, but there are over 600 of them. So I get it. It's a big bucket to fill. Very clear explanation, Anita. Good. I'm so glad it's serving you. I was teaching Inspired Beyond Anatomy Level 1, which is the course that I designed for yoga teachers in training. I think everyone should have that training, not just yoga teachers, but everyone. We do anatomy and physiology, both Eastern and Western. And when we got to the muscle part, I was talking about intrinsic and phasic muscles. And in one training, there was a Masters of Sports Medicine, Masters of Sports Physiology, a Masters of Sports Physiology student in the yoga teacher training. She was using the movement training as part of, you build from all different places. That's what I did. I took lots of different training and then added them all together so that I could be the best at what I could do with the body. And so she was doing the same thing, I'm sure. And when I mentioned intrinsic muscles, she raised her hand and had never heard of it. And I thought, wow, at a freaking master's level in university, we're missing this. And we are missing it. And that's why when I found this piece, intrinsic muscles, and I started adding it to what I was doing clinically, it literally was the game-changing difference between getting people from 70% relief to, over the goalpost of getting them out of pain. And that's why it became a touchstone in my method. And that's why I teach it. So I really want to emphasize for you guys that if you haven't yet heard of it, or if you just started hearing about it, but you don't yet know what to do about it, dive deep into this topic on intrinsic muscles, because it really does change things. Naima sent me a love letter. I think one of the reasons they don't understand the concept is because they don't actively use the concepts. They stop at movement and or the manual portion. Yeah, could be, right? And so yeah, absolutely. And let me think now. You're making me wonder, like, when did I start putting it in? I know it was when I was hitting a wall of like 70 to 75% relief, and clients were singing my praises, and that's lovely. It's not about me, it's about them. But I'm kind of competitive. Like I want an A+, I want like 100%. And so I thought I must be missing something. And so I kept looking and looking. And actually what I did was I went back into my course notes when I was training. I went through my massage therapy notes. I got an undergraduate degree in physical science. I went back through those notes and I couldn't find like anything that I had overlooked or forgotten about or missed. So I know that I wasn't taught it either. And so I hear you, Naima, that they understand the concepts, but they're not using it. I wasn't even taught intrinsic muscles. Like I didn't even hear that concept. It wasn't in any of my notes when I went back to review. And so it's not a blame game. Like I wasn't taught about the endocannabinoid system either, because they didn't know about it at the time. So I get it. Like, everything comes when it comes, but the intrinsic portion is really important. And so, I just remembered what I was going to say. Oh yeah, I did it. It all came back to me. Okay. Here's the takeaway for today that I want you guys to use and implement this week while you're introducing intrinsic focus into the work that you're doing. Here's the number one way that you can tell if intrinsic muscle engagement is actually at play. Ready? Okay. If the body is moving away from gravity, so for those of you who are watching, I just did that. So here I am sitting at my computer. Let's assume that I'm in optimal sitting posture. I'm not. I'm going to just tell on myself right here. I'm not in optimal posture. So right away, we know I'm not in optimal posture, so I can't be engaging intrinsically. Period. We already covered that. But right now, I'm sitting in a position where I can tell that my head's like in a certain frame where you can see me. Because if I was going to do something optimal, I would have raised my computer, right? But I didn't. My computer's down here on my counter. Okay, so I'm down towards gravity. Okay, no intrinsic engagement. And that's separate from my horrible posture at the moment. Okay, if I move my body though away from gravity, I have to engage intrinsically to do that. Yeah, Naima, you just did it too. That's right. So that's how you know if the person that you're working with is engaging intrinsically. If you give them something to do and their body naturally moves away from gravity, or they feel like they moved away from gravity, then you know that they're engaging intrinsically. It's really the only way to check, because you can't see the muscles in the mirror. They're not mirror muscles. They're deep, 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 deep layers in. So you can't see them engaging unless you recognize that the body's moving away from gravity. And that can be just a little bit, by the way. That can be just a little bit. Okay, so much more to go on that, and we can walk through a couple different muscles and check whether they're engaging intrinsically as we move on into other weeks. We can go over intrinsic muscles again and again. Like I said, it's a gigantic topic, almost as gigantic as the rest of the phasic muscles in the body. But I did promise Laura, even, and she promised to come in while she's on vacation. So I had to deliver at least this part of it. And there's more to come. I will continue to feed you guys more intrinsic muscle action if that supports you, if that's something that you love. And as promised, we are now at the halfway mark of our training for today. So I'm going to turn the tables over to you guys and invite you to come on in with any questions that you have. You can come off mute and just speak it if you want to ask me the question. Your voice is being recorded, of course. You can come off, you can come on camera if you want me to see you. I don't care if you're having a bad hair day. I just like to make eye contact. And if that doesn't work for you, then go ahead and use the chat and type in whatever question you have. And it can be anything, like I said. You're welcome, Anita. It's my pleasure. You can ask any question, whether it's client related or muscle related. It doesn't have to be what I talked about today, but I'm happy to expand on that if you want more. It can be something else that you learned that you're not sure if this is it, or, there's no question that's off the table. If you're new here, please know that. And I'm more than happy to answer questions for you. So who has a question? I love this part. Who has a question? How can I serve you? What's happening for you? What's going on in your world that you would like some support on? What are you confused about? It's okay if you're confused. We'll get clarity like that. Who has a question for me? Anybody? Maybe someone's typing. Laura's back on camera. That usually means you have a question.
So can we go back to my question from a couple weeks ago about
Sure.
how I propelled this? Okay, so I'll recap it for anyone who wasn't on that call. So basically, I have a client. He's only 50 years old, so he literally is turning 50 this week, actually. We do a private yoga every couple weeks, and he has a hard time going from down dog, so hip extension, and bringing his leg through and coming into a low lunge, so hip flexion. He usually has to kind of like hop his leg a little bit forward. So he can't like do it in one fluid movement. It's kind of like a bump, bump, bump. It looks kind of jagged, for lack of a better word. He does have some low back issues, so to speak. He thinks they're genetic, which I know we've heard that rationale before. I know, Gina, I know.
We debunked it. We were like, that doesn't matter here.
Debunked right now. I totally am with you on that. And I also do some training with him. So we do like posterior chain work and things like that. So it's not like he's doing like all anterior work. He does have a very physical job. He's a superintendent at a golf course. So he does do a lot of like manual labor and things like that. So my question and how this came around was like, is that just going to be the way he moves, or can we somehow, come to like he's obviously not using some intrinsic muscles, clearly. Right. So how do we get him to kind of think about it and fire those?
Okay. Yes. Good question. Thanks for bringing us back around to what started this conversation topic, which I loved. Okay. So a couple things. First, you said, you you brought up a point that I really want to highlight here, and that is the body is always healing itself. So nothing's really permanent, right? I mean, of course, if we have hardware, the hardware may be permanently part of our structure, but maybe not. Sometimes hardware comes out too. So the reason I want to emphasize this is it's part of our strategic thinking is being optimistic, of like seeing right through the restriction into possibility, because the body is always healing itself. If you still have a hip joint, it is designed to move the way it was designed to move. So we can get you there. We just got to figure out what's in the way. And that's, again, that strategic thinking part. Okay. So I love that you're there and you're like, I got this, guy. I got it. Okay. So intrinsic muscles. So let's piece this out, Laura. Okay. I'm going to give it to us in a couple steps. Intrinsic muscles, we said, and I'm so glad I remembered to say this piece because it really matters right here with your client. We said that intrinsic muscles are strengthening when they are moving away from the earth, okay, when they are opposing gravity. Gravity is their nemesis. Okay, that's fact. So do we think that someone who's 50 has been weakening their intrinsic muscles for a longer period of time or strengthening their intrinsic muscles for a longer period of time?
I'm going to go with weakening.
Yeah, exactly. And here's what I say when folks are like, oh, as soon as I hit fill in whatever age, because it's different. And as soon as I hit 35, as soon as I hit 40, as soon as I hit 50, as soon as I hit 60, everybody likes to blame their age, right? And this is what I say to them. And this is part of our messaging, guys. This is part of our messaging to enroll them back into the work that you do. It's not about your age, dear client of mine I love. It's about how many minutes gravity has been winning the game. And there is an entire group of muscles in your body that weakens with gravity. And that's not throwing shade at gravity. I happen to be really grateful for gravity. I love my kitchen, but I don't want to be floating above it. I want to be on the ground. So I love gravity. And because I know gravity and because I know intrinsic muscles, I know that I need to be strengthening intrinsically. So as soon as you tell your client that, it lets them off the hook. There's no blame. They're not blaming their body or their age or the earth, gravity. And now you've enrolled them into possibility of what can happen. That is actually clear messaging. They're all in then. They're like, okay, well, what do I do? That's literally what you'll hear them say. Great, here's what you do. The answer is you get them to strengthen intrinsically. And that is, obviously a bigger conversation than we can get today, but let's get some ideas around for this chat. And also, for those of you who've not been here with me on these types of trainings, I can't really give you a treatment plan for a client I've never met. So I'm not going to even assume that I know what's up with this love. I'm just going to give you some ideas that you can put through together. So here's some ideas, okay? And we talked about this when you first brought this guy up, actually, Laura. The first place to go commonly is into phasic muscle action, right? Like hip flexors, the psoas and rectus femoris. Sure. Why wouldn't you go with the heavy hitters? Of course. But you told us that you had done that. And so that wasn't, making the cut with this guy. One thing to know about muscles, as I told you that they are in two different, so now we're really getting into it. Can't make this simple. Okay. Now that I told you that the muscles are in two different groups, classified in two different ways, phasic and intrinsic, there are a couple of them that overlap. The psoas is one of them. Okay, and there's lots and lots of conversation around psoas. I actually think that the conversation around psoas tends to miss the mark. There's a lot of talk, but not a lot of, I like the way I talk about psoas. So psoas has an intrinsic piece of it as well. So yes, the stepping forward, the hip flexion is psoas action for sure. And there's an intrinsic portion of psoas too. Now that gets a little complicated to think about a muscle that has a dual role. So I want to take us off of the conversation about psoas for a minute and just go to muscles that are only intrinsic. Because if we can just get the intrinsic part understood, then you can start layering it into a muscle that classifies both ways, okay? All right, so there's other muscles, of course, hundreds of them that are intrinsic muscles. And one potential for your client, is the basket weave that makes up the pelvic floor. That group of muscles is literally designed to hold your organs up and in. Up should be the key word, guys. Up, away from gravity, we know that that's an intrinsic muscle group. That's all it does. That's all it does. So oftentimes, the more we're on gravity, very familiar with that being pre and postnatal certified. Yes, good Laura, awesome, perfect. And boys have the same muscles. Sometimes they forget that they have the same muscles, but they do, because there's all this talk about prenatal and postnatal, and boys aren't included in that conversation, but they have the same muscles. They have the same basket weave. Okay, so what I recommend is that you walk them through how to get in touch with those muscles and lift them away from gravity. And it wouldn't be much different than the way you would teach a female to do that. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I go through that exercise in Inspired Beyond Anatomy Level 1. Can't remember where I know I teach that in a course that's available for download. Here's the short of it though. If you can stop the flow of urine, you are engaging intrinsically, because the way those muscles contract, when they contract, they don't just siphon down on your urethra. They actually siphon up. They do this, right? That's the action that those muscles take when they contract. So one option for only engaging intrinsically in that area, because we know that that's the area of the body that your client is expressing weakness, intrinsic weakness. One option is to get them to stop the flow of urine and keep that stopping the flow of urine and then move through the exercise. And that will be remarkably difficult for them. And here's how I know. For everybody who's here, if you want to play along, go ahead and stop the flow of urine. And everybody knows how to do that because we've all had to pee before. So go ahead and stop the flow of urine. And stop the flow of urine and keep that engaged and keep that engaged and keep that engaged. And notice that already while I'm talking, you probably let go of those muscles. Already, right? Even when you have to pee, you like squeeze and then release and squeeze and then release. What we know about muscles, all muscles across the board, is that it takes 90 seconds for them to generate a change. So if you're looking to create strength in a muscle, you must hold that contraction for 90 seconds. Otherwise, you're just going through the range and power that that muscle currently has. Range meaning if you're lengthening it, or and power if you're thinking about contracting it. So if I'm looking to engage a muscle and I need to hold it for 90 seconds, and the muscles that I'm looking to engage oppose gravity, gravity is like doing this, like an arm wrestle. Gravity is constantly in contracted held state. It's constantly keeping me on the earth, which means in order for me to strengthen against gravity, I've got to constantly be moving away from gravity without letting go. So for those of us who just played along and we couldn't even hold our muscles that stop the flow of urine for more than 2 seconds, we're not generating strength. Gravity's winning. So getting a client to engage intrinsically in the pelvic floor, as an example, and hold that through a dynamic action, like bringing their hip from hyperextension into flexion, remarkably freaking hard and so worth it. Naima sent me another love letter. Let me expand. Is it as simple as saying pull body parts away from gravity, or is there a step-by-step strategic method to get them there? Well, body parts, so I would say, Naima, almost, right? So we want to be really clear in our messaging because our clients don't know what we're asking them to do, but instinctively they do. So when we say something, this is actually speaking on anatomy principle number 8, which is we're talking to the nervous system, okay? If we speak to our client in a way that is not clear messaging, because they instinctively know what's going on in their body, if we're not clear with them and there's a disconnect for them, it generates nervous system duress because they actually do know the answer. We're just the conduit for them, right? We're not the healers, guys. We're not healing anybody. They're doing it. So we want to get really laser and succinct about the way we message. And so here's the distinction that I heard, Naima. When you say body parts, my arm is a body part. So if I move my arm away from gravity, I haven't necessarily engaged intrinsically. That's a phasic action because I can see it moving. So just to get more clear for our client, yeah, what we want to do is take their brain to the place that we want them to engage, and we can't see it, and neither can they. They can in their mind's eye, but we can't see it. And then we want to get them to focus just there and then move away from gravity by engaging or contracting a muscle, not a body part. So it might seem like a body part, like, the anal sphincter is a body part. But what we want to do is give them clear instruction on how to engage a muscle and move the muscle away from the earth more than pointing at the body part. That would be more clear. Does that make sense to you? Does that land? Yeah. Okay, great. Love the question. So you're already thinking strategically. You're like, I'm on this. I can see all your clients this week are going to get a new experience. I can tell already. That's awesome. Laura, did that support you?
Yeah. So pelvic floor is kind of where you would go first, is what you're saying, and kind of strengthening that. I actually teach a connection breath kind of exercise for my pre and postnatal clients. And that is kind of like making sure they're lifting those muscles up and contracting and then bringing them back down. Not a Kegel, because that's another conversation.
Right.
And those are not actually functional, especially for people who have hypertonic pelvic floors. I hate it when people blanket like prescribe those. I'm like, no,
the same way.
It's not a one size fits all thing. It's just not. So yeah, I think doing something like that and some other things. Yeah, for sure. I hear what you're saying. That's awesome.
So talk to us. Good. And I'm going to give you a little bit more too, as we move forward with this lad. Can you tell us a little bit more for those who are listening? I heard some question marks go off. When you say no to Kegels, why? Can you give us a brief answer on why you say no to Kegels? Because I say no as well.
I say no because the first woman I ever worked with, actually her birthday's today.
All these birthdays in your life this week.
Who was postpartum. I did not prescribe Kegels. I taught her the connection breath that I teach. And she went to pelvic floor physical therapy, which I love those people. They're like my BFFs and I make friends with all of them, the pelvic floor therapists. And they had told her, just, a friend of hers was like, oh, do Kegels. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's right. And basically what hypertonic means, kind of going back to what we used last week, is like, it's like a bicep that can't relax. It's constantly like in a state of contraction. And so if you tell somebody who can't not contract to do Kegels, it's actually going to make their symptoms worse. That's how I kind of was brought up. I mean, I defer to you, Gina, but that's kind of how I was taught with that kind of meant. Yeah.
And how can a client tell if they are able to contract or not? How would they know? How would you know? Because we don't do manual exams.
Right. Well, sometimes too, there's like some stuff that goes on with like the transverse abdominis and all that as well. Usually it's usually like you just said, like if they have incontinence issues, so if they can't hold their urine in, which I've had a few clients that have had that issue. That was actually why she went in particular, was because she was having urinary incontinence when she tried to do things. So that's where I've seen it the most common. Mm-hmm. But to tell if somebody can do it or not, I guess it would be like we just did, if they can hold it up for as long as they can. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. You mentioned transverse abdominis. That's a key player in intrinsic muscles. It's only an intrinsic muscle. It's not a phasic muscle.
Right.
Your client has low back pain, you said. So I would look at, if he was a client of mine, I would look at the alignment of his pelvis, because you got to have alignment first before you can engage strength and then do function. So I would look at the alignment of his pelvis and make sure that he can be in optimal. Then I would look at the relationship between QL and transverse abdominis.
Okay.
And then psoas.
GDA. Yeah, when you said psoas earlier, I was like, that's what I was thinking too.
But psoas from an intrinsic lens, not phasic.
Yeah. Okay.
Unless you haven't done that with him yet, then do phasic first for sure. But we talked about that a few weeks ago and it sounded like you had already addressed that.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. You guys, I would really, somebody just came in too. Len, I didn't say hi to you. I'm glad that you're here. Betsy, I'm glad that you're here as well. You guys would be surprised at how many boys really benefit from pelvic floor engagement. Mm-hmm. And, if it's part of professionalism, but if you can't say anatomical parts without feeling like you're in a Beavis and Butthead conversation, then figure out how, because they need it, right? All people need, we all have the same muscles. We all have the same muscles. And boys really benefit from that, especially as gravity has been winning the arm muscle for sure. All right. Awesome question, Laura. Lots of meat. Keep us posted on your private client and let us know if that supported him. If not, that's just not the muscle group that he needed. That doesn't mean you failed. That means that we need something else for him. And it might be more complex too. But what I do know is that you can sort it out. And the reason I know that is because you and I have shared community now, and I know that you know some stuff. So you're on it. Yeah. Okay, loves, we got about 15 minutes left. Who else has a question for me? Any question, any client question, any anatomy question, any training question? Who can I support next? You can chat it in the chat. You can come off mute. Naima, you just came off mute.
Yeah, I was gonna type it, but I was like, nah, it's gonna take me too long. So
yeah, let's hear it.
So I'm thinking about moving the muscles intrinsically, or is that a proper way to say it?
It is, yep.
Intrinsically. So yep. I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, like thinking of different ways of like, I can sort of explain that to clients. And I was like, would it be effective to say, okay, first of all, like, what would you say, like the definition of, or the opposite of gravity is, since that's what's kind of pulling those muscles in the opposite direction of where we want to go, and it's necessary. What would be the opposite, say, of gravity, or a word that you could utilize in order to get them to maybe understand that? Like, so everybody kind of understands gravity. We understand gravity if we've been living on Earth for any period of time. So you understand gravity, but everybody doesn't understand what the opposite of gravity is, you know, to do that movement of pulling those muscles up, and not only pulling those muscles up, but constantly and consistently pulling them up, because you can't just pull them up and then just forget about it and then you'll go back to the way that you were. It has to be consciously, you know, you're doing that until it becomes unconscious and you're just naturally kind of doing it. But what would you say would be maybe a word or because I'm thinking the opposite of gravity. I think because a lot of people tend to think that way. I think like, okay, well, if I'm not doing this, or if I'm not letting this happen, what should I be doing? And to just say intrinsically, like, obviously that's maybe more for us. And then, you know, we have to do our work in order to, like you said before, explain it to our clients, you know? So I guess that's where my thought process is going. It's like, I don't know, maybe force, I don't know, but because I'm like, what are we saying in order to really help them to engage those muscles in that manner? That makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. It's a great question. And I love your understanding of it, Naima. Like you get it, you know why it's important, and you know that you need to communicate it. So that's awesome. You're already being in service because of how conscientious you are. So that's amazing. You're bringing up a really good point, because gravity is a constant. Our clients know that though. So I don't have to teach them that, neither do you. So that's awesome. So what we want to do is just let them know that gravity is a constant and its presence on the planet is in direct opposition to muscles that we need for them to strengthen. And then I would tie it to a why. So we talk about, in our professional development part of the mastery program, we talk about messaging a lot. We go over it and over and over it. And there is a difference between a feature, this is what I want you to do, and a benefit, which is the so what part to your client. They're like, so why does that matter to me? Always tie it back to why it matters to them. So whatever they come to you with is what you tie it to. So for example, if I was, Laura's client, right? And he had low back pain and he wanted to do yoga, I would let him know that in the absence of using these muscles, it's perpetuating the discomfort that he's feeling and making it difficult for him to get to this yoga pose. That's the benefit for him. That's what matters to him. The truth is that the benefits are endless. It matters to different people in different ways, because every intrinsic muscle has a function, and every lack of function equals pain. So that the benefits are endless. So you got to really be in touch with what matters to your client and not assume. Sometimes we assume because we see things and we're like, oh, that person needs X, Y, and Z, but they don't actually want that from you. They want something else. You got to really get in touch with that. That's the professional part of the messaging, etc. And then the phrasing of it is built into how I teach them to move. So again, we said at the very beginning of our intrinsic talk, they've got to be in optimal alignment first, right? Otherwise, I can't engage intrinsically, not fully anyway. I did a little as I was sitting here in poor posture. I showed you guys coming away, but I'm not in optimal posture. I'm just in better posture, right? And it's not a judgment. It's just an assessment. So the first thing I'm going to do is already have a conversation with them about what's optimal. And then when they get into optimal, oftentimes what happens is they automatically start feeling their body move. So I don't have to teach them how, I just emphasize that they did. And then I give them the math equation about how it really needs to be something that they focus on, right? And that ends up turning into sometimes the most beautiful conversations, because clients will say things that you don't even realize are tied. And they'll say things like, well, I can't worry about anything or be stressed because all I can think about is my own body right now. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm out of back pain. Great. So we've got rid of their back pain. We got rid of their stress. They're not ruminating on the repeated tape that goes through their brain. Like, we've done amazing things for them. And again, mechanically, when we get them into optimal alignment, that is posture, intrinsic muscles will engage, because their job is twofold: posture and balance.
Right.
So the conversation just usually starts just a second before where you thought it did. And then it makes it a lot easier. The key word that I use, you were saying I think you said opposing gravity, or opposite, I think is the word you used, if I'm not mistaken. The key word that I use is away. Mm-hmm. Opposition to me tends to, I'm a wordy, nerdy person. I swear like a sailor, but there's certain words that matter to me a lot. And when I hear words that generate this feeling of clashing, I want to be really thoughtful that that's what I'm trying to do, because otherwise I don't want clash. I want balance and harmony in someone's body, between their relationship with themselves and their body, between me and them, between them and the world. I want balance and harmony. So I won't use words that have opposition and clashing in them. And that's why I choose the word away. There's nothing wrong with the word opposite, except for what I just emphasized.
No, yeah, I just use that because I have a very active imagination. So when I hear certain words, then I automatically kind of like it's a imaging. I automatically kind of see things happening. So I'm like, okay, well, if this is pulling down, what opposes that pull down and pulled up? So yeah, away is a much simpler term, and people can definitely understand that, so but yeah, that's just where my mind went, because I'm just like, okay, well, if that's pulling down, and what's going to pull it back, what's going to take it back in the opposite direction? And automatically my mind said, okay, well, what's the opposite then? And I just started to you parse a word. Yep. Okay, well, what's the opposite then of gravity? So full force, whatever, that
totally.
type of thing. So
totally. Yeah, I love it. I'm with the word lifting work. Reagan, good question. It might, depending on, again, what muscle we're asking them to work on. So for example, transverse abdominis is horizontal. Lifting wouldn't register in that muscle. And as we said with Naima a few moments ago, lifting like a body part might end up engaging phasically. So it's not a universal word, but it doesn't mean it wouldn't work. And all of them work, guys. I'm just giving you my fine-tuned opinion. I'm just not sugarcoating it for you guys. I'm just giving it to you like, legitimately, this is what I say and this is why. But you have to find your language that matters to you, that feels natural for you, so that you can connect with your client and who you're serving, for sure. For sure. Perfect. Thank you. Yes, my pleasure. You're welcome. Well, this was super fun, guys. Are there any last minute questions? We have just a few minutes left. Are there any cool? Reagan says still had tree pose in mind. Oh, tree pose. Yeah. So Reagan, we might have to have a whole class on tree pose. Tree pose is one of those poses that keeps me up at night. So the thing with tree pose is once you're in it, it's too late. It's the getting into tree pose that engages intrinsically. So maybe that's a little cliffhanger for you, and we can pick it up at another time. If you'd like us to go over tree pose, I need much more than 3 minutes to be able to do that with you. But I understand what you're meaning. Once you're in tree pose, you want them to move away. That's engaging some intrinsic muscles. The muscles that matter to be strengthened in tree pose need to happen before you actually get into it. Naima, you raised your hand.
Okay, sorry. One more question.
Sure.
One more question, because it was on my mind from the first time when you started talking about the intrinsic muscles being attached to the bone. So for something sort of like a Kegel, that area, or not that area, the pelvic floor. When you contract those muscles, and I know that's holding in those internal organs and muscles. What happened?
Oh, I'm here. I still hear you.
Okay. I just like something happened. Okay. Does it on a even any scale, I guess a minor scale, any scale, does it move the bones in as well, since it's attached to the bones? Like, does it like sort of, and I'm thinking of like, I don't know, and then maybe even Laura might even be a student, I don't know, but like how with pregnancy and things like that, and how the hips kind of, they open up or whatever, the ton of everything opens up a little bit in preparation for the baby to come out. But like, do the muscles, when you're doing and you're contracting those muscles, do the bones sort of move a bit too to support that?
Yeah, all muscles move bones. All muscles are attached to bones, and all muscles move bone. To the degree that they move them differs muscle to muscle. When we're talking about pelvic fluidity during pregnancy, that's often a function of ligaments and hormones that affect the laxity of ligaments more than it would be bones. And the more laxity we have in ligaments, the more muscle engagement we need for balance. Yeah, awesome. And you're right, Laura probably has more information to share too. She's on vacation right now, so I'm going to guess she's not going to answer you at this moment. But oh, look at her. She's right here till the end. Laura, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I would just say, yes, Naima, when someone's pregnant, basically you're putting so much pressure on so many different organs and things like that. So like Gina was talking about, the pelvic floor is kind of, I call it the hammock and it holds up like all these different things. So as the baby starts growing, you're putting more and more pressure on that area. And then when the baby's out, it slowly starts to release. But a lot of times there's just a lot of issues that come up with that, because it's not just going to like bounce right back like people think it's going to with all of a sudden not having, a 6 to 9 pound child maybe sitting on it, or 10 or 11, whatever it is. So that's why pelvic floor PT has become such a great resource for me, for clients, because I never even knew it existed until like 3 years ago. And I'm like, where's this been? But it's if you find a good pelvic floor therapist to work with, they can be really, really great, and have a lot of great information. And like Gina was saying too, it's not just women, it's men as well. So
awesome. I love our community. I just love our community and how you guys all know such great stuff and support each other. It's amazing. I'm super, super happy that you guys were here today. I know for those of us in the US, it's a holiday week, so you never know who's gonna be free on a holiday week. It feels like our days get condensed a little bit. That said, I'm gonna be here every Tuesday for the rest of the year. What? So mark your calendars, invite your friends and your peers. Everybody's welcome, of course. We're gonna keep talking. Laura, thank you so much for taking care. Oh yes, my pleasure. My pleasure. I felt great too. Thank you all for being here and for spreading the word and for doing all the amazing work that you do in the world, because there's more people that need us than there are those of us to serve. So every time we heal one person, we don't do the healing. Every time we help someone heal, we end up healing the vibration on the planet. I love these calls. Told a friend to come. Awesome. Yeah, everyone's welcome. Give them the Zoom link so that they can register and get the notification. Sometimes if we share a link, I was just on a class recently, a different community, and everybody logged in and they were the same person because they obviously had been sharing the link. And that's cool, but it makes it a little complicated for us to like ask Q&A because then their names. Anyway, give them the Zoom link. They're all welcome to come for sure. And thank you again for being here and for all that you're doing to support everybody that you that you serve, everybody that comes to you, everyone that trusts you, that they don't even know that you're here right now, spending your time to do better and be better for them. I know that you're here though. And so I just want to acknowledge you for that. I see you. Even those of you who aren't on camera, I see you. I acknowledge you for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's the week of gratitude. So I feel like I'm effusive in my thank yous. And I will look forward, Heather, you're welcome. It's great to have you here. I will look forward to seeing all of you next time. Okay, Tuesdays at noon. I'll see you then.